Hello, and welcome to another episode of Movies, They're Pretty Good. I'm your host, Travis Dudding, and today marks the second Best Picture nominee month that we're doing, or whatever. The Oscars were last night as of this recording. It was a pretty good show. I liked it a lot. I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed the winning musical performance a lot. And then I liked a lot of the wins. I thought it was a good year for wins. Nothing that got me upset or anything like that. There's some years that I'm literally like yelling at the TV, but this year was good. But more on that later. Today we're talking about the Coen Brothers 2007 No Country for Old Men. One of my favorite movies of all time. Just an amazing movie, perfect movie. So let's get right into it. All right. So we open on some narration by Tommy Lee Jones. His character is Sheriff Ed Tom Bell. And he's just talking about like how his daddy was a lawman, and talking about like some of the old time sheriffs didn't even carry a gun just because the gist of it is like just how much things have changed and stuff like that. And then I was telling this story about this kid that he sent to the electric chair for killing a 14-year-old girl, and how that he wasn't sorry about it. Like the newspapers called it a crime of passion. He said there was no passion in it. Just that he'd been thinking a long time about killing somebody, and this was when he did it, and said that he knew he was going to hell and he'd be there in about 15 minutes. So yeah, and then in the narration he's like, I don't know what much to think about that, but just really puts you in the mood for this movie going forward. Then we see, as the narration comes to an end, we see someone getting arrested and getting put in the back of a cop car, and then the police officer sets a like an oxygen tank in the passenger seat, so like something that this guy was carrying on him. Then we see back at the police station, he's calling it in saying like, yeah, I like picked this guy up on this road, and he had like an oxygen tank for like emphysema or something. And then as he's on the phone, we see in the background, it's Javier Bardem. The character's name is Anton Chigurh, but we'll find that out later. We see him like pull his his cuffed hands from behind his back, and he puts his legs through his arms, and then he stands up, and we see him walking up behind the cop, and then right as the cop hangs up, then he puts his cuffs around the cop's neck and pulls him onto the ground and starts to choke him out. And we get this like slow zoom into his face as he's like murdering this person, like by suffocating them and choking them out. And just this like angry, like monstrous face that he's making and stuff like that. It's just like, it's really crazy. And then the sheriff, or I think it's a sheriff, I don't know, is working for the sheriff department. And we just see like him kicking like crazy, trying to get him off, but this guy has the upper hand, and you just see all these like black marks on the tile from his boots, like after he is dead. Like you just see like all these like black scuffs on the floor just from this, and it's super. I mean, it's scary what's happening, but it's a very cool shot and everything. And then especially for being like right at the beginning of the movie, you know. So then we see him in a police car pulling that he stole after this, and he's pulling somebody over on the side of the road. And he gets out of the car. He's got his little tank with them, and he walks up to the window and asks the guy to step out of the car. And the guy's like, "Hey, what you got there?" And he's like, "Just step out of the car." And so he gets out, And he tells the guy, like, after he gets out of the car, to hold still for a bit. And then he takes, connected to the oxygen tank. Well, I don't know if it's oxygen, but connected to the tank is a hose. And then it's got like a little, it looks like when you go to put air in your tires, it's like one of those, the handle looks a lot like that. And he holds the handle up to the guy's forehead and pushes the button, and then something comes out of the end and just goes right through the guy's forehead. And then we'll later find out that this is a air gun that they would use for like slaughtering cows, like a more humane thing. That way they're not like using a whole humane because it's so instant, but also like economically better because they're not like using a gun, which maybe that's what they used to do, is just like, that's a lot of bullets, and also scarier because it's loud, so it's not freaking the other cows out, and whatever. But yeah, that's what he's using to kill people. That's his weapon of choice. So kills this guy, takes his car. That way it's a little harder to track than having a police car, and a stolen police car. So then we cut to Josh Brolin. He's playing Llewellyn Moss, and he's hunting. We could see through his scope that he's tracking a deer. There's a whole bunch of them, like out in this open field, and he's got his sights on one. And he's like talking to himself, like, okay, don't move. And then he fires it, and it hits, but it's not a kill shot, and the thing runs off. So it's just injured. So he's like, shit. Like, now I got to take care of this, because it's like, one, he's probably killing it to have dinner. And two, then it's like, well, I didn't kill it. Now it's just this injured animal. So I got to go find it, put it out of its misery, whatever. So he's grabs his stuff, and he's going to look for the deer. And he's tracking it. And once he gets to the spot where he shot it, like, and there's the blood on the ground and everything, he notices a smaller trail of blood going off in a different direction. And he's like, okay, like, what's this about? And then he sees off in the distance, there's a dog limping. So there's some injured dog out in the middle of nowhere limping and trailing a bunch of blood. So he's like, okay, what's this all about? So he follows the dog, I think, or follows the trail, maybe in the opposite direction, like where the dog came from. Yeah, that makes more sense. So yeah, follows the trail to see where the dog came from, and then he notices a bunch of cars, like out down in this valley. A bunch of trucks, like pickup trucks and stuff, and like the doors are all open, but like, and you can kind of see that there's like someone laying on the ground, but it's like kind of hard to see from that far. So he goes down to investigate, and then sure enough, there's like bodies everywhere, bullets everywhere, guns, like blood, all this stuff, and like all the bunch of bullet holes in the cars and everything like that. And he's like inspecting the site. There's one guy, he opens one truck door, and then the driver is still alive, but like very like close to death at this point. And he's speaking Spanish. He's saying like agua. And Llewellyn's like, no, I don't have any water. And it's like, no. And then he keeps asking. It's like, no, like, I don't have any agua. I told you. And then he's asking this guy, like, trying to, it's like, hey, like, what happened? Like, who's the last man? Like, who's the último hombre? And, like, trying to just figure out, like, who survived. Like, is there somebody else that's, like, still alive? Like, because it's unlikely that there's this big shootout and then everybody dies. Like, someone had to get away, right? And he's just going around inspecting. He pulls the tarp off the back and notices it's a bunch of drugs, like big bricks of cocaine, heroin. They don't. I think later they say heroin, but yeah. So just the back of the truck's just completely filled with these bricks. So obviously it's a big drug deal gone wrong and everything. So he goes out looking for this last guy and everything. Tracks him to this like big tree, and he's kind of like talking to himself. It's like, okay, like, if you're gonna stop, you're gonna stop. You're not gonna stop out in the open. If you gotta stop, you're gonna stop in the shade. one because of the coverage, and two because it's a desert. You don't want to just like die out in the sun. And he could see from the distance that there's a guy under the tree, but he's like, okay, like I'm gonna wait a little bit. He's like checks his watch, and he's gonna like give him a certain amount of time and just watch him and see if he moves. And I didn't track like how much time he gives him, and then but after a certain point, after he's satisfied, like, okay, this guy's not moving, he goes over there, and then sure enough, the guy's dead. But next to him is a this briefcase. So picks up the briefcase, and because he's like, okay, I guess this is what it's all about, and opens the briefcase and full of $2 million in cash. So it's like, okay, like, all right. So he takes the briefcase with them. It cuts to him pulling into the trailer park where he lives, and he's taken some of the guns, like the machine gun or whatever, I think, because he's putting those under the house. And I thought he was putting the money under there, but then he walks into the house with the briefcase, and his wife's sitting on the couch watching TV, and she's like, what's in the satchel? And he's like, don't worry about it. And, just kind of like blows her off, but like, but it's like a friendly blow off. You know what I mean? He's not like being rude to her. And the wife is Carla Jean. She's played by Kelly MacDonald. And then we see him laying in bed, and he's a little restless. He's just thinking. He's like wide awake, and he's like I forget what he says to himself, but I think he just says like, all right. And then he gets out of bed, and we see him like filling up a gallon jug full of water. And the wife gets up like, hey, like, what are you doing? And he's like, there's just something I got to do. And then he says like, if I don't come back, tell my mother I love her. And she's like, Llewellyn, your mom is dead. And he's like, all right, then I'll tell her myself. So he's going out there. He's going to give this guy water and then like hopefully save him. But then also he knows that this is dangerous. I could get killed, but like it's weighing on his conscience, and he just has to go out there. So he does. He gets out there. He leaves his truck up on a hill and walks down in that valley. Gets there, but then the guy is dead at this point. He waited too long. Should have came back earlier, but he didn't. But as he's noticing this, he looks back up at the hill where his truck is, and there's a second truck up there, and he can hear voices like talking up there. Some guys speaking Spanish. We don't know who they are, but they're connected with these guys down here, obviously. They're probably like, hey, this deal was going to happen, and going to find out what, like, okay, no one came back with it. Either we don't know which side they're on. Are they like the side waiting for the money to come in, or are they the side waiting for drugs to come? Either way, they're like, all right, like, we got to go find out what happened. But then they're looking down there, and they see him, because as he like makes a run for it to hide behind the car, then they start shooting at him. So he like hides under the car, and he's like, okay, like just thinking to himself, like, just, you can see him like planning in his head, like, okay, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then he takes off running. So he's running through the desert, and it's nighttime and everything is dark. Well, I guess it's like just before dawn. And because by the time he gets over to the river, the sun's like kind of starting to come up, and it's just such a cool scene, like him running through the desert with this truck with its like lights shining on, like the floodlights shining on him, and then you could just see the silhouette of the guy standing in the back like shooting at him. And as he gets like to this top of this hill that goes down into a river, he gets hit in the shoulder. He gets shot in the shoulder. He tumbles down that hill. And he's like, all right, like, I got to make a run for it on the river. He pulls his shirt off and then jumps into the river. But as that's happening, a dog, this pit bull, shoots out of the truck and is going after him. And then he dives into the water, and the dog dives in after him, and he's swimming down the river with this dog, like, it's slowly gaining on him. And it's just like crazy, because it's a little more hydrodynamic, I guess, because aerodynamic would be like air, but I don't know. But dog's gaining on him. He finally gets to a spot where he like gets out of the water, but he's got to like dry off the bullets because it's not going to fire because they're all wet. So he's like trying to like frantically dry them off real quick, like blow on them and like get all the water out of the magazine. And he puts the clip back in the pistol, and right as the dog is jumping up at him to kill him, he manages to shoot the dog in the chest, and the dog like knocks him down because it's already like fully in the air, like diving for him. And so like, yeah, literally at the last second, hits this dog. So now it cuts to back to Javier Bardem, Anton Chigurh. He's at a gas station filling up, and he's inside. He buys a snack, and he's like, okay, like how much for the gas? And the guy tells him, and then he's like, just kind of has this like long conversation with the gas station attendant, and just like kind of like figuring him out and everything, but he's like making the guy uncomfortable to where the guy's like, all right, like I gotta close up. And he's like, what time do you close? And it's like, right, we close now. It's like, now's not a time, like when do you close? And then he's like asking like, do you live here in that house out back? And he's like, yeah, like have you lived here your whole life? And he's like, no, like this was my wife's father's place. And he's like, oh, so you married into it? And he's like, yeah, I guess if that's how you want to put it. And he's like, I don't know what other way to put it. Like, that's just how it is. And then he's like, kind of like he's like being intimidating, but not like over the top intimidating. Like you could tell something's up. Like obviously the guy's like getting uncomfortable and wants to just like close up shop for the day. But he's not like outwardly threatening him. But then he like tells him, it's like, what's the most you've ever lost in a coin toss? And he's like, oh, I don't know, like nothing I can think of. And so he like flips a coin and puts it on the counter covered, and he says, all right, call it. And he's like, well, like what are we calling it for, you know? Like he's like, everything. It's like, well, I can't call it if I don't know what I'm what I'm gonna gain or lose. And it's like, you're gonna lose everything, like just call it. And yeah, so he like finally like breaks him down, and he's like, okay, like heads, and then lifts his hand and it's heads, and he's like, oh, there you go, like congratulations or whatever. So he gives it, he hands him the quarter, and at some point calls him friendo. I forget which part of the conversation that is, but that's another like reference point to this movie. And he's like, oh, like don't put it with the rest of the coins, that's your lucky quarter, like you know, like don't treat it like a regular coin, which it is, you know. And then he just leaves and goes off into the abyss, like back where he came from. And then we see Llewellyn's back at the trailer, and he's telling Carla Jean, his wife, to pack up, that she has to go to Odessa to stay with her mom for a little bit. And she's like no, like mom's gonna be upset, and like what am I supposed to tell her? Just like say, like stand in the doorway, say, Mama, I'm home. And just saying like, all right, well, like how long do I have to be there? And he's like, well, like at what point would you stop looking for your $2 million, you know? And he's also saying that he's not going to go with her, and everything. Like they got to split up. That way it's like to keep her safer and everything. Like that way he could figure this out while she's like safe somewhere else. And then finally convinces her to go and everything. Then we see it's nighttime, and Anton is there at like near the scene, and there's these two guys in suits pull up, and like then the three of them go together to the scene of the shootout. And he gets there, and Anton asks one of the guys like, do you have the receiver with you? And he's like, yeah, I got it right here. And then he like takes it out of his pocket and shows it to him. And then right when Anton gets the receiver, he asks for his flashlight back, and then shoots both the guys, like shoots one in the heart and one in the head. So like these are obviously like we don't like know anything for sure, but these are like upper management guys in whatever shady business they got going on. And he's like, he just made a play for like, all right, I'm going to get this money myself, like I'm not working for anybody now. Like, this is my money now. And so he gets the receiver, which it's like a transponder thing to track the briefcase, and there's something in the briefcase, like the transponder's in the briefcase, and this is just a way to find that. So that's what it's tracking. Then we see this is the first time we get to see Tommy Lee Jones and his sheriff character. He's loading up horses in a trailer. He's borrowing one from his wife. He's borrowing his wife's horse, and she's like, "Oh, I need to start charging the state for renting out my horse all the time, And so he's loading up some horses in the trailer. Gets down to the scene like where Anton Chigurh left his car there, but he set it on fire. The car that he stole from that guy that he killed. So that car's burning. The deputy's waiting there for the sheriff, and he's played by Garrett Dillahunt from more recently he was in Fear the Walking Dead, the spinoff, the first spinoff from The Walking Dead. Like a little further back, he was in the sitcom Raising Hope. Those are the two things I know him from. But yeah, he's a good actor. He's really funny and everything in this. Little bit of a comic relief, but not like over the top comic relief. He's not like playing it broad or anything. He's very authentic. So they're there, kind of assessing the situation and everything. They get down to the scene, or they get over to Llewellyn's truck, and sheriff's like, "Oh, like I recognize that truck. That belongs to Llewellyn Moss." And then he's like, "Oh, like do you reckon him like a dope runner?" And he's like, "No, not that I could think of, but who knows these days, basically." And then they get down to the scene, and they figure it out that like they see that it was like a drug deal thing, but the drugs are gone at this point. Someone came and got them. We don't know if it's Anton Chigurh or if it was someone else, like entirely, but drugs are gone. So then, like they're checking it out, and then they do put it together that, like, okay, these guys were killed in an execution, but the rest of it was a shootout. Like it's completely different, like where the bodies were and everything, because they're like too casual, while the other guys are just like look like they were in a shootout. And then it cuts back to Anton, and he's at Llewellyn's trailer. He walks up to the door and then blows the lock out with his air gun. Like he puts it up to the lock, and lock flies out, hits the wall on the other side from the wood panel wall. It falls to the floor. He walks in. He grabs the mail off the floor and zeroes in on a phone bill. And he opens the phone bill, and he's looking at it like, oh, there's a bunch of calls to this one number. And so he's real quick. Like he's thinking real quick. Like, all right, like what number do they call? This is obviously family. Maybe that's a place that they would have ran away to. Maybe that's their hideout. After he looks at that, then he just grabs a bottle of milk out of the fridge and has a seat on the couch and just starts drinking milk and staring into the TV. And this is an interesting scene, which I don't really... this is one... I feel like every time I rewatch this, I pick up on a new thing or like realize the meaning of something, and this is one that I still haven't cracked yet, but I also haven't done any digging into it, so it's probably something easy, or maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe there is no meaning to this, but just the way he's like sitting there thinking, I think he's just like planning his next move, but he just looks so serious, and he's just like staring at his reflection in the TV. So then he goes over to the receptionist for the trailer park, and is like, "This is Llewellyn Moss home," or "I'm looking for Llewellyn Moss," and she's like, "Did you check his trailer?" Like, And he's like, no, he's not there. Like, well, maybe he's at work. Like, do you know where he works? And she's like, I can't tell you that. And then he's like, he starts to press her, but she's like, she's holding her ground and she's like standing firm. She's like, I told you I can't give out no information. Information. She throws a little T in there in her pronunciation. This is all happening in West Texas, by the way. And then, but like, she stands her ground, and then he doesn't try to pull any like coin toss game on her. And I think it is because like she is very like assertive, I guess, because the other guy, the gas station guy, was a little like, oh, I don't know what's going on here, and like a little like more stereotypical country bumpkin type guy. But this lady was like, hold your ground and like a little tough, like her personality and everything. So he's like, no, I'm not going to get one over on her. Like, like almost like he respected her. And so he leaves. Then we see Carla Jean is getting on a bus, like a Greyhound, and Llewellyn's there, like saying goodbye to her, like just like kind of reassuring her, like, I'll see you later. Like, don't worry about it. I'm going to be fine. Like, I promise, and everything, which, famous last words in any movie, Everyone always talks about the, like, Chekhov's gun. Like, if you see a gun in the first act, it'll go off in the third act. If anyone ever says, like, trust me, I'll be fine, or anything like that in this type of movie, they almost always die. It's very rare that they don't. So then after that scene, we see the sheriff and the deputy get to the trailer. Then they notice that the lock is blown out, so they go right in and they're looking around, and they're like, "Oh, like that means the guy we're following is there," because they don't know who it is. They know who Llewellyn is, but they don't know who Anton Chigurh is. They just know that someone bad is after them. And then so as they're like, oh, like, when do you think it was here? Like, how long ago do you think that was? And the sheriff notices the bottle of milk sitting on the coffee table. And he's like, oh, that's just downright aggravating. And he's like, look at that. It's still sweating. And the deputy's like, oh, we just missed him. And it's like, we got to put out an APB. And he's like, based on what? Like, what are we going to put out? Like, looking for a man who had just drank milk, Like, they don't know who this is. They don't know who he is. They don't know what he looks like. They don't know anything about him. All they know is that he was just there and that he drank milk. That's all they know. So then the sheriff, it just mirrors the other scene, because he sits down and he's looking at his own reflection in the TV, just kind of like just trying to think what to do next. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like we know this, but like there's so many things we don't know. So then we see Llewellyn checking into a motel. Gets in there, and then the lady's asking like, well, what, like, how many beds do you want? And he's like, it doesn't matter, it's just me. And then she's like, well, like, you gotta know, like, what. He's like, she's just all being like all particular, like, okay, like, I need to know how many beds you need. And he's like, it doesn't matter, just give me your room, So he finally gets into his room, and then first thing he does is he opens the air vent near the ceiling. And he puts he ties a rope to the rope string, something, to the handle of the briefcase. And then he pushes the briefcase into the vent. And then he takes the pole from the closet, like the coat hanger pole. Takes that out of the closet, and then he pushes the briefcase like into the vent and like kind of around the corner, basically. And then he puts the rope in like to where he can grab it, and then puts the vent back on and everything like that. So then we see Anton is at a payphone, and he's calling the number that he saw on the phone bill, and then it's Carla Jean's mom, and she's answering the phone like is Llewellyn there? And she's like, why the hell would he be here? And it's like, do you expect him anytime soon? Like, why would I expect him? Like, just like giving him the runaround and everything. And But she's just so oblivious to what's going on. Like, she has no idea that her daughter's even on her way to go see her or anything like that, you know. So it works out at the time, but then he still knows that, like, okay, like, there is somebody that they could go to in Odessa, and I know the number and everything like that. So he still has that bit of information, but he's like, all right, like, I'm getting nowhere with this lady. And then hangs up on her. We see Llewellyn at the store. He's getting some new boots and some socks from the guy, like, ask him what size and everything like that. Goes into the bathroom. I don't know if it's the bathroom there at the store or at the hotel, but he's sitting on the toilet. He's like pulling his socks off, and there's like some blisters on there and everything like that, just from being out running from a truck full of guys with guns. That'll give you some blisters. Plus he's like all shot, so he's got to like clean his wound and everything in the shoulder. So after he's done at the store, he takes a cab back to the motel, but as he's pulling into the parking lot, he notices there's a truck waiting outside his room, and it looks like the cartel truck that he saw before. And he's like, just keep driving. And the cab driver's like, hey, like, what room? Just tell me what room and I'll drop you off. And he's like, no, just keep driving around. I want to see if someone's here. And he's like, hey, like, I'm not looking into getting into any trouble. And he's like, I'm not looking to get into a jackpot, is what he says. And he's like, listen, you're already in a jackpot. I'm trying to get you out. Like, just take me to another hotel. And he hands him a $100 bill, and they go to another hotel. So then cuts back to a diner where the sheriff is already like eaten. And then the deputy walks in and is like, hey, like the report came back or autopsy or whatever from that guy on the side of the road. So the guy that Anton put used his little air gun on and stole the car. He's like, hey, like the autopsy report came back on that guy. And he's like, oh, the sheriff's like, oh, like, what's the type of bullet? And he's like, that's the thing. There was no bullet. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, there's an entry wound, but no exit wound. Like, are you saying that this guy, like, went in and dug the bullet out? And he's like, oh, I don't really want to think about that, but I don't know what else it could be. And then so they're just kind of stumped on that whole thing. Then we see Llewellyn. He's out on another shopping spree. He was waiting outside the gun store for like right when it opened and everything, and guy opens up, he goes right in, gets a shotgun, and I forget the caliber shells and stuff that he got, but gets a new shotgun. He's like, oh, do you have any camping supplies? He's like, yeah, like over on that side. And then he's talking to the guy in the camping section, and he's like, do you have any tent poles? And he's like, okay, like, if you give me the tent, like, what kind of tent do you have? Then I can get you the right kind of poles. Like, what's the model number? And he's like, never mind that. Like, just give me a tent. And he's like, okay, what kind of tent do you want? And he's like, the kind with the most poles, And then he's back at the hotel, or the motel. Gets in there. He's sawing off the end of the shotgun. He's like wrapping it with duct tape and stuff. And then he's making some contraption with the tent poles, and he gets some of the wire hangers out of the closet and makes like a big hook at the end of the poles. And then he goes over back to the receptionist for the motel and asks for a second room. And she's like, oh, like, you want to change rooms? And he's like, no, like, I want to keep the same room, but I want a second room. And she's like, oh, well, I can give you the room next to yours. And he's like, no, like, do you have like a map of the rooms? And she's like, oh yeah, we got something like that. So he's looking at the map, and he's like trying to find the one that's not next to his room, but like on the other side of the like there's two sides of the motel, and he wants the one on the other side, basically. And he's also trying to like figure it out where he can get to the briefcase through the vent from the other room, basically. That's his whole plan. And he also knows there's people tracking him at his room, so he needs to get out, get to the other one. So he does that. And then we cut to Anton. He's driving around in a pickup truck, and he's got the receiver sitting on the passenger seat. And then as it starts to beep as he's like driving down the road. And he's like, okay, like then now he's paying attention, and the beep's getting a little stronger as he's pulling up to the motel where the Welland is. And so he pulls into the parking lot, and then it starts beeping a little faster, and then he's driving real slow next to all the rooms, and then it starts to beep like beep, 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 like real fast next to the one room, and then it slows down a little bit, and then he backs up, and then that way he's able to pinpoint like which room it is, so he figures it out. Then it cuts to him like in the reception area of the hotel, looking at the map because he's doing the same thing. He's like, okay, like that's the room it is, like I want the one next door, basically. We don't see any of the interaction. It's just the one shot of him like looking at the map, which I think is really funny. So then we see him in his room, Anton, and he's opens his duffel bag and pulls out this shotgun with a big ass silencer on the end. I think it's the only time I've ever seen a shotgun with a silencer on it, but it's insane. And he's got his little air tank thing. Then he takes his boots off, but we don't know why yet. Then we got cut over to Llewellyn. He's opening the vent in his new room, and he's got his new pole thingy, and he's trying to hook it on the briefcase and everything so he can pull it over, and he's just working on that. Then it cuts back to Anton, and he's walking past like the rooms in his socks, like so that way he doesn't make any noise, and he's got his shotgun, he's got his air thing. He gets to the room where the cartel guys with the truck are, and he blows open, shoots the lock off with his air gun, swings the door open, turns on the lights, and immediately blasts some guy sitting in bed who's like scrambling to get his gun, blasts him, and like his arm is like this crazy shot where like his arm is like flopping off, like dangling off, because he like got him like right through the arm, and his arm's like just dangling there. And then he shoots him again. Then he shoots one towards the bathroom, and he's like, okay, but he doesn't hear like anybody fall or anything like that. Guy throws the door open to the bathroom. He's got a Uzi. He's shooting at him, but Anton's a step ahead, blows him away, back into the bathroom. He's down. Then he walks into the bathroom, and there's a guy with his hands up in the shower, like, no, like I don't have anything, like it's fine. And so he tries to ask him. It's like, hey, like how did you guys find this? Because he, as far as he knew, he was the only one with the transponder. Like there was only one like receiver, So he's like how did you guys find it? And then he's not saying anything. He's like, no, like I don't have anything. And then so he still has the shotgun pointed at the guy, but he pulls the shower curtain closed before he shoots him. That way he doesn't get splattered with blood. And then that's the end of that guy. All right. And then, so the whole time this is happening, Llewellyn's like trying to get the briefcase out in the other room, and he can hear the gunshots. So he's like, oh shit, like what am I going to do? So he's like kind of like panicking a little bit. And we don't know what's happened with him. And then finally he it cuts to him, and he's in the passenger seat of someone's car, and it's just this guy like driving him, and he's like, you shouldn't be doing this. And he's like, doing what? And it's like, even a guy like you shouldn't be out here hitchhiking. Like, you just kind of like scolding him, telling him it's like dangerous to be out there hitchhiking. But he got out of there safe. He still has the briefcase and everything. So yeah. And then Anton just kind of, I think he breaks into the other room, and he pulls the vent open and everything, and he could see the you can see the tracks in the dust where the briefcase got dragged through the vent. So he's like, okay, like, he figured it out, but he's, still not there. Like, he doesn't know where he went or anything like that. So then it cuts to an office building, and it's Woody Harrelson coming in. He's got like a big old cowboy hat on and everything, and he's walking into the office of Stephen Root. He's the one from Stapler guy from Office Space. He's been in a bunch of other stuff. He's a more accomplished actor than that, but that's like the main iconic role that I know him from is Office Space, the Stapler guy. So he's there, and he's he's like, asked Woody Harrelson's like, could you identify Anton Chigurh by sight? And he's like, yeah, like I could identify him, sight, smell, whatever. Like I know this guy, And he's like, so basically he's Woody Harrelson's getting hired to go hunt him down because he's going after the money and he's killing everybody and it's their money. So, he needs to like get Anton out of the way. But it's basically a suicide mission to go after him. And that's what Woody Harrelson's telling him. It's like, yeah, I'll do it, but like, it's not going to be easy. And like, this guy's like a psychopath. So like don't expect much, basically. So then whatever city that Llewellyn gets to with the hitchhiker, he's going into I think it's the Eagle Hotel or something like that, Golden Eagle, something like that. So he's going to this hotel and he's checking in with the clerk, and he's like, hey, like, there's somebody looking for me. Like I'm not, he's like, pulls out money. He's like, hey, I'm not asking you to do anything illegal, but there's somebody looking for me. It's not police, so it's nothing like that. Like, I'm not running from the law, but I just need you to tell me if anybody checks in here. And he's like, and I mean anybody. I mean any swinging dick is what he says. So he gets up into his hotel and everything, and he's laying in bed, and then he's like, nah, there's like, it's kind of talking to himself again. He's like, nah, there's just ain't no way. And he turns on the light, and gets the briefcase, and he's like kind of inspecting it and everything. He opens it up, and then he's like kind of flipping through the stacks of bills, and he notices one is like 100 on top and 100 on the bottom, but then it's ones in the middle. And he's like, okay, like that's weird. And then he kind of pulls it apart more, and then cut into the stack of ones is the transponder, like that the tracker is finding. And he's like, okay, like now he knows like that's how they're finding him and everything. So he grabs his shotgun and no, first he calls down to the front desk, and it just rings. And he's like, okay, like the guy said he'd be there till 10 a.m. and he's not answering the phone, so something's up. He grabs his shotgun and is just kind of sitting on the bed, like looking out the door. And then he turns the lamp off. That way he can see like a shadow from the hallway. And then as he's sitting there looking at the bottom crack of the door, then here come 2 feet standing there at the door. And they're just standing there. And then they walk away seemingly. And then the lights go out in the hallway. And he's like, all right. So he's a little more on edge now. And then as he's sitting there on the bed, here comes the lock getting blown out by the little air gun and hits him in the stomach or the ribs or something like that. It hits him hard. He's like, ugh, like just knocks the wind out of him. And then he shoots, fires a shotgun at the door, and then takes that opportunity to grab the briefcase, open the window, throw the briefcase out, and then jump out the window, and almost gets, like, because at this point Anton breaks the door open and fires at him, but it like barely misses him. Like, he doesn't get hit. It hits the glass and everything. He jumps out the window, grabs the briefcase, and he's running through the alley as Anton's like firing at him from the window. So he's out on the run now. Like, okay, like this guy's like shooting at me. Like, and he finds like a truck coming down the road and like flags it down so he can hitchhike again. And he's like, hey, like, don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. Because he's like standing there with a shotgun, like waving it around. And it is Texas, but it's still, you know, you still got to be careful. And so as he's like telling the guy, it's like, hey, I'm not going to hurt you. I just need you to get me out of here. As the guy's like sitting there listening to him, bullet flies through his neck. And just like, you know, as he's like bleeding out. And then another one goes through his forehead. And then he's just done. And then Llewellyn jumps in the car. And basically is like, he's ducking down. But then he like hits the gas. So that way he could like kind of drive it. But he's like down low enough to like not get shot. Because there's just bullets like going through, like breaking through the window. Like, you know, and then finally ends up crashing into another car, like on another street and everything. And then bails out of the car, and he's hiding behind the parked car. And then it's just like a shootout back and forth with the two of them. And they both end up shot, like both of them, Anton and Llewellyn. But Anton gets away, and then Llewellyn's like super injured. He's bleeding everywhere. And so he starts walking to across the bridge, across the border. I think they don't say for sure what town this is. I think it's El Paso, and he'd be crossing into Juarez, but I'm not 100% sure, you know. But either way, he's crossing the border to Mexico. He gets up on this like on the cement barrier, because there's like this grassy area before the river, and it's like tall grass and everything, bushes and all that stuff. So he's like, okay, like I'm gonna hide the briefcase there, and so he climbs up and tosses the briefcase over. And then he's continuing to walk across the border, and then here come three douchey college Americans coming back from getting drunk in Mexico. They're all like holding Coronas and stuff. And then he's like, hey, like, I'll give you $500 for your jacket. And the guy like has the audacity to be like, well, show me the money first. You know, it's $500 in 1980. Like, come on. Like, what are you doing? Like, do you think that highly of yourself, you know, that you deserve more or anything like that? And then so he does like give it to him and everything, gives him the $500, and then asks the other guy for his beer. There's three of them. Asks the other guy for his beer, and the guy with the beer is like, well, how much for it? And then the third guy, the only nice person, is like, just give him the beer, man. Like, you know. And also the nice guy like asks twice, like, were you in a car accident? You know, he just keeps asking, and then the guy, he's just like, yeah, it was something like that. So then he's got his coat, and he continues to walk into Mexico, like literally like walks past the guard shack, and the guy's like in there like pretty much sleeping. He just kind of like puts one eye open to like see like who's coming in, and then like goes back to his nap, you know. And then it cuts to the next like dawn, and this mariachi band is singing at him, because they probably just think he's some drunk guy that's just like been laying on the ground, and they're just like messing with them. But then he like kind of moves awake and kind of turns, and they could see that he's like covered in blood. And then he holds out a $100 bill and says, "Medico." He's asking for, you know, doctor, get to a hospital, something like that. So then we see Anton the next day. He's walking down like the city street or whatever. He goes up to this car. He's like kind of looking around. No one's watching or anything like that. Before this, we see him like cutting the sleeve off of a shirt. And And then so he walks up to this car. No one looks around. No one's around. Opens the gas tank. He has like the shirt on a stick. He like dips the shirt into the gasoline, pulls it out, puts like cotton and like a piece of paper or something over the gas tank, and then puts the soaked shirt on top of that, and then lights that on fire. And then he walks into this car is in front of a pharmacy, and he lights that on fire, walks into the pharmacy. The car blows up. Like, no one saw him do this, so everyone's just like rushing outside to like see what's going on with the car. And he uses this opportunity to, now that everyone's distracted, to go behind the counter at the pharmacy and steal all the medical supplies that he needs. And he's like limping really bad, like there's blood going down his leg and everything. So he gets in there, he gets everything that he needs. Then we see him back at his hotel room, Motel Holiday Inn, and cuts his pants off because it's like the clothing is like fused to the wound and everything. Cuts that off. We see him getting into a bath with it, so that way he can get the wound clean and everything. And it's just like all tore up and everything because he took a shotgun blast to his leg. And he gets out and he like mixes. It's probably some kind of alcohol solution or whatever. I didn't read any of the labels, so I don't know what all he's doing. But he's like mixing stuff together and he like squirts that on the wound and everything. Like hydrogen peroxide and something else maybe. And then he's got some tweezers. He's trying to sanitize those. He's not doing a good job at it. But then he pulls out all of the little all the buckshot from his skin and everything. He's got to pull all the little pieces out. And he's doing all of this on like a tarp too. Like he lays a tarp down on the floor and to take his boots off, and the boots are like full of blood and everything. It's crazy. Gets all bandaged up and everything, and is injecting himself with something too. So probably like some kind of local anesthetic. So then we cut back to the hospital in Mexico. It's Llewellyn's in bed. And then Woody Harrelson, what's his name? Carson Wells is his character's name. Not that they say it too much. He's there visiting him. He like brings him flowers and everything. And he's like, oh, like Llewellyn wakes up and he kind of like is startled and he's like, don't worry, I'm not the guy that's after you. And he's like, I know you're not. Like, I've seen him. Like, he's like, well, if you've seen him and you're alive, then you're like a lucky person. Like, and he basically like doesn't even believe him that he did see him. And it's like, because usually people don't live to tell the tale if that's the case. And he's basically like says like, hey, like if you just give me the money, I can get you out of this. I can protect you, and I'll even give you some of the money. Like, you know, like it's like, I don't blame you for taking it. I would have done the same thing, but this is one guy you don't want to mess with. So it's your safest bet for yourself. And then he even says like, maybe he doesn't come after you. Maybe he goes to Odessa. And he's like, why would he go? He's like trying to play it cool. But he's like, you see on his face, like, he's like, oh shit, like, how do you know about Odessa? And he's like, why would he go to Odessa? And Carson says, to kill your wife. Like, you just like very nonchalantly. And, but then he's just like, he doesn't want to take the deal. And he's like, hey, like, I know it's a hard decision. Just think about it. I'm right across the water at the Eagle Hotel. So he's got a room at the same hotel where all that shit went down last night. Then he's heading back to the hotel and everything. Gives him time to think about it and everything. Then we see the sheriff. He's on the phone with... Oh, wait, no. He's gone to Odessa to talk to Carla Jean. That's what it is. And he's having lunch or breakfast or something with her. Just like she's like, hey, like I don't even know where Llewellyn is. Like, so like even if I like. I can't tell you anything. Even if I wanted to tell you, like I can't because I don't know where he is. He's not telling me anything. Like I just know I'm here. And then he starts to tell her a story about like cows being slaughtered and stuff. I forget the main gist of the story. I got a little distracted at this part. But then he says like, oh, but that's not how they do it anymore. They use like an air gun, like with a bolt and everything. So he basically describes like Anton's main weapon that was like stumping him before. So I think he does like he end up putting that together, but you don't really see it. And then she's like, "Why are you telling me this story?" And it's like, "I don't know. My mind just wanders." You know, you can just see that he's just like he's getting close to retirement and everything. So he's just kind of just sharing these like old stories like from when he's younger and all this stuff, you know. Just kind of using it to like sway how things go, but also just like kind of give like helpful advice and everything too. And then we see Carson Wells, Woody Harrelson's character. He's crossing back into the States. He's going over the bridge, and he's kind of like looking down into the bushes and everything. And then he does see the briefcase. He can see it from the bridge and everything, but he leaves it there. I'm not really sure why, but he does leave it there. Gets back to his hotel. And he's going up the stairs to his room, and then here comes Anton Chigurh around the corner and follows him up, and he's like, all right, let's go to your room and we'll talk, you know. And then follows him up to his room. They sit across from each other. Anton's got his shotgun with the silencer and all that. And they're sitting across from each other. And then Woody says like, you don't have to do this. And then that like just gets into like a whole conversation, and there's going to be more on that like line later. And he tries to make a deal with Anton, which is funny because he literally just told Llewellyn about how like this guy doesn't make deals. Like you can give him the money, but he's still going to kill you just for inconveniencing him. So he's literally like gave that advice, and then like a couple hours later trying to make a deal with the guy, you know. He's like saying like, hey, like you let me go, I'll take you to an ATM right now. You can have $14,000. Like I could pull out of the ATM like right at this moment, you know, like that's fine. So they're just sitting there across from each other, and they're talking for a little bit. And then he says like, he's like talking about how Woody Harrelson's talking about like how he has like principles and everything, and then Anton asks him like this philosophical question, like if the rule that you follow brought you here, then how good was the rule really, you know, because it still brought you to this moment where you're about to get killed. So like what was the point basically? And then the phone starts ringing, and then they both kind of look at it for a little bit. And then Anton looks at it, like he looks away from Carson down at the phone, but then fires the shotgun into Carson, killing him, you know. And then he just then he grabs the phone and picks it up, and it's Llewellyn calling like, is Carson Wells there? And he's like, and then Anton looks over at the dead body and says, not in the sense that you mean. And he's like, oh, who is this? And he's like, you know who it is. And then there on the phone, like he tells him, it's like, hey, like you can, if you give me the money right now, then I won't go to Odessa and kill your wife. He's like, I can't say the same for you, that you'll make it out okay, but like you can at least keep her safe and save her life, you know. And then, but I think this hits his ego a little bit, Llewellyn, and he's like, no, like I got a better idea. Like I'll come, like I'll bring you something, you know, basically like saying like don't worry about that because I'm gonna come kill you. But he really just doesn't know like what he's getting himself into. And then hangs up the phone on him and everything. But one thing, my favorite part of this scene is that like how nonchalantly Anton notices the blood is coming towards his like shoes, and then like when it's like an inch away from his shoes, he picks up his feet and puts them on the table. Like, oh, I don't want to get blood on my shoes, you know, just like how normal it was to him to be like, this guy's bleeding all over the floor. Let me just pick my feet up. You know what I mean? Like it was like if you're in the middle of something and something spilled, like if you're at a restaurant and like where it's not your responsibility to pick up something that like say something from another table got spilled and the water's coming and you kind of might like kind of pick up your feet a little bit while it gets cleaned up because you didn't spill it and you don't work at the restaurant. I'm not saying it's like it'd still be nice to like help and everything like that, but it's not your responsibility. So you might just pick your feet up. You know what I mean? Because maybe you're like holding a baby and it's like, like I can't help, you know, because I'm busy. It was just like that level of, I have like that type of attitude towards it. You know what I mean? Just like that. It was that normalized for this like guy to be bleeding out. And it's like, I don't want to get blood on my shoes, you know? I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking that. But I do like that scene a lot. So then it's the next day again. Llewellyn's crossing back over to the States, and he's getting interrogated by the guy at the gate. Probably because it's a little suspicious that he's in a hospital gown and everything. And he's like, who do you think gets across the border? And he's like, U.S. citizens. He's like, some U.S. citizens. And it's like, I get to decide who comes over. And he just starts asking them questions. But basically, like, it gets to, like, were you in the service? Or are you in the service? And he's like, I'm a veteran. And he's like, did two tours in Vietnam. And he tells them which, like, what outfit. And he, like, tells them, like, the specific dates and everything. And then at that point, he's like, tells the guy that's working with them, like, get this man over to like wherever he needs to go, you know. So, and I'll tell you that like that kind of mentality, there is a lot of you will run into that a lot. Like as someone who is a veteran, like I got out of a traffic ticket before just because like they saw my military ID back when I was in the military, you know. And sometimes, you know, I'm sure there's people that use it to their advantage. Like, look at, like, the Stolen Valor people. Like, they literally are trying to get that type of treatment by going out in a uniform, and they don't even get the uniform right. Because they don't even, like, think that far ahead. They're, like, worse than, like, a shitty movie. Like, military people know what I'm talking about, but it's just, like, I don't know. Like it's like they're not even trying. Like they didn't do any research, and they just like put on a uniform they found at Goodwill and go out in the public and try to get free food, and then they get caught and put on YouTube. Because they're like, honestly, a lot of them like seem like mentally ill people, to be honest. Like just like the way that they're talking and everything, they're just people that are not all there. They probably got like screwed over by the system, like when mental health funding got axed in the 80s and everything. That's literally like what the subtext of Joker is, like how like mental health funding got obliterated in the Reagan era. And then anyways, back to the movie. So yeah, he lets him across the border once he finds out he's a veteran, and then we see him he's getting into the same store where he got his boots before. And it's the same clerk and everything. And he's like, hey, like, he's walking in with, it's just the boots and, like, the hospital gown and everything. And he's like, hey, how are those, like, Laramie's? I forget what the brand was. It's like, hey, like, how are those holding up? It's something with an L. How are those holding up? But he's like, oh, those are great. I just need everything else now. And he's like, Then he tells the guy, it's like, I bet you don't have a lot of people coming in without clothes. And he's like, no, sir, it's unusual. And then next scene, we see him like with his new outfit on and everything. He's going to get the briefcase out of the bushes under the bridge. It's still there because Woody Harrelson didn't get a chance to go back because he got killed. And so then we cut to Anton. He's got he's walking down the hallway of some sort of office building. He's got his little air tank, kicks open the door to Stephen Root's office, and puts up his shotgun, and then it's not the air tank, it's just the shotgun. And as like Stephen Root's like scrambling to get a gun out of the drawer, Anton just like blows him away with the shotgun. And then as he's like bleeding out on the floor, the guy that was meeting with Stephen Root, the accountant, is just like standing there like am I about to get killed? And then Anton just asks, without looking at him, he's like, who are you? And he's like, me? Like I'm nobody. I'm just accounting. And he's like, who gave the it's like, did he give the Mexicans a transponder? And he's like, yeah, he thought that the more people looking for it would like better the chances of him finding of the money getting back to him, basically. And he's like, no, that's dumb. Like, if you need something done right, you pick the right tool and you stick with it. You know what I mean? And then and it's quiet for a little bit, and the accountant says, "Are you going to kill me?" And he looks over. Then he turns to him, and he kind of looks at him and smirks at him. He's like, "That depends. Do you see me?" And then the scene's over. So we don't know. Like, did he say like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about," and then he lived, or did he like say something dumb and get murdered? We don't know. So then on the payphone, Llewellyn's talking to Carla Jean and saying like, okay, like I need you guys to go to El Paso at this particular hotel or motel. Every time I say hotel, motel, holiday, like that's just where my mind goes. Sorry about that. And then I know I already used that joke earlier too. That's why I didn't want to say it again. So I was like, oh yeah, like go to El Paso, and everything like that. And so then we see her and the mom. They're in a cab. They're heading to the airport. She's like, and then the mom's just complaining, like, it's like, why do I want to go to El Paso? Like, I literally, like, I have cancer. I don't know anybody in El Paso, but here we go, like, following after this deadbeat husband that I don't even like. And my daughter just wants me to go there. And so they get to, I don't know if it's the airport or the bus station. I forget. But they pull up to that, and then I forget, like, the daughter's distracted with something. Maybe this is when she's on the payphone with Llewellyn. And yeah, I think that's what it is. So she's on the payphone with Llewellyn, and the bags are getting taken out of the cab, and then one of the cartel guys comes up and is like, oh, like, let me help, like, talking to the mom, like, oh, let me help you with those bags and everything. And she's like, oh, like, what a gentleman. Like, at least there's, like, one nice person left in West Texas, you know, something like that. And then he's just wanting to get information out of her. He's like, oh, like, because they followed them there because they know who they are. They're like, okay, like, we need to find out where the briefcase is going. So if we follow the family and get the information out of her, then we can find where the money is. So he's just trying to get information out of the mom or the mother-in-law. And so she's like, oh, like, we're going to El Paso and this. And then she even says, like an uncomfortable line. It's like, oh, it's not every day you see a Mexican in a suit. And, you know, and just like typical, like, old person problematicness that is on even higher back in 1980, I'm sure, you know. That's like mild on what could have been said, but he's just like all nice about it because all he wants is to know like where they're going, and so he gets the information from her. So then Carla Jean is on the phone with the sheriff after that, and then she's like, okay, like I need to like I'll tell you where we're going. Like, do you promise like you just want to keep him safe? Like you're not gonna like he's not gonna get into trouble or anything. He's like, yeah, like that's all I care about. Like is just like getting him safe. Like just tell me where you're going. And so she tells the sheriff, and then we see there's a scene of Llewellyn at the hotel, like where he's gonna be staying, like where he told Carla Jean to come and everything. Desert Sands Inn, I think is what it is. He's like walking into the room and walking back to his room, and he's walking by the pool, and some girls like kind of flirting with him and just saying like wants him to come drink beer, and he's like, no, like I'm married, like waiting for my wife. And she's like, like I'll go get more beer, you could stay married, like whatever. Like she just wanted someone to hang out with and drink with, basically. Maybe that's all, I don't know. But then so that's where that scene ends, and then we see the sheriff. He's driving a car. He's coming up on the Desert Sands Hotel, and then we hear like rapid fire gunshots, like, and then we see a bunch of guys scrambling to get into a pickup truck, and there's still gunfire, and they're driving off all crazy and still shooting out of the car and everything. Right as the sheriff is getting to the Desert Sands Inn, he gets there. There's a dead body in the pool. I think it's the woman wanting him to come drink beer. There's a dead cartel guy in the parking lot. And then gets over to the motel, and then there's Llewellyn dead on the floor. It was too late. Like, literally, like, if he had left 10, 15 minutes earlier, you know what I mean? Or made one less stop, to go to the bathroom, it's like he would have been there. And it's like, and then your brain is racking, like, would that have made a difference? Would he have been able to help Llewellyn? Or would that have just ended up him dead too, and I'm sure that's what's going through his head at that point too. And then we get the heartbreaking scene of Carla Jean pulling up in the cab, getting to the hotel that has all ambulance and police cars and caution tape and everything, and then she just knows right away because she sees the sheriff and just sees the look on his face and just breaks down immediately. And that's a rough scene right there. So then sheriff is out talking to, I think it's just the local for El Paso, maybe the El Paso sheriff or something, another older guy, and they're having dinner, just like talking about the whole thing, like man, like you just didn't see stuff like that like back in the day. And then they're just talking about like young people, more so the El Paso guy. I just thought like man, like society's changed. You see these young people with tattoos and piercings and stuff, and just kind of like reminiscing about the old days, complaining about how things are now and stuff like that. And this is like, it was during this scene where it finally clicked, because I've seen this movie a bunch of times and like didn't really think about what the title meant. And this is where it kind of clicked for me. It's like, oh, like this is what the title is. It's like literally because this isn't the first time this happens. There's a couple different scenes where a conversation like this or a narration on this subject happens, and it's literally just saying like the country, like this is no place for old men anymore. And it's not saying that they're like getting phased out or anything like that. It's just like it's basically saying if you're not adapting to the way things change, and this is over since the beginning of time, I'm not saying this is just a current thing, like only now are like young people like, hey, like if you don't want to change, no, It's always been like this. And it's just eventually you become the old person who doesn't want to change because you've changed too much, or you're just tired of changing, or whatever it is. And it's, it's just not for you anymore, And I'll get to that point at some point, Everyone always thinks that, like, no, like, literally look at, like, the baby boomer generation who's literally out there, like, Woodstock and all this stuff, and just, like, free love, free everything, peace and love. And the majority of them are, like, who the younger, like, the Gen Z complains about, like, are the hard-headed, not wanting to change and everything like that. And, I'm not saying, like, one way or the other, like, everybody has to change, or I'm not taking a stand on anything right now. I'm literally just saying, it's like, you look at that generation who was, like, the most known for the free love, hippie stuff, and where they're at now. And it's, so it's like, if you think that you're not going to be stubborn when you're old, your time will come. You know what I mean? That's the point, and that's what I think the title is referring to. And that's my interpretation of it. And I know I got on a little tangent there, but that's just what I took from it, and what clicked for me on this viewing particularly. So then, after that whole conversation with the El Paso sheriff, Tommy Lee Jones sheriff, he goes back to the hotel where, the crime scene is and everything, and he just wants to, like, check it out himself. He gets there, and we see a shot of him looking at the door, but he's not opening it. And then we see Anton inside of a room looking at the door, like in the corner, like he's hiding, and with his gun and everything. And then, so it's like, then you're on edge, like, oh my God, he's like, is this where Tommy Lee Jones is going to get murdered? And then he opens the door all the way, and there's no Anton. So it's a little bit of a fake out. Either it was taking place at two different times, or he's in a different room. Like, it doesn't really say one way or the other. But he just goes in, he kind of inspects the room a little bit. And then at some point we see that the vent has been opened by a coin, which is what Anton used to open the vent at the other hotel, like where he killed the guys in the bed and everything. And where Llewellyn had the briefcase in the vent. So he had opened the vent with a dime, because it's skinny enough to get into the screw. And so we see the vent has been taken off, and then the screws are out, and then we see the dime there too. So he's found the briefcase. At least we think. I think it's either he found the briefcase or he opened the vent to find that the briefcase was already gone and that the cartel took it already. But the fact that they had to scramble out of there, like still shooting and everything, makes me think that they did not get into the motel to get the briefcase. So then we get a scene where the sheriff goes to visit a man named Ellis, who seems to be some relation, just the way he's talking about, like, because he talks about how he gets a lot of letters from the sheriff's wife, keeping up to date on the family stuff. So he's a relative of the two of them. But later on, when he's telling stories, he's talking about, like, oh, uncle, this uncle, and this aunt. He's just referring to them as uncle so-and-so, aunt so-and-so. Like it's both of their relations. And he gets there. It's like, it's a pretty, like, it's not like a hoarder house, but it's definitely a little, like, not taken care of. Guy's in a wheelchair and everything, so that's part of it. And there's, like, a bunch of cats everywhere. And he's like, how many of these things you got now? And it's like, what, the cats? I don't know, several, And he's like, depends what you mean by got, because like some of them are wild and some of them are just outlaws. So it's just these cats just like come and go because it's probably just a place where there's gonna be food. So some of them are wild and strays and stuff. And then they just like talking about different stories, and he's asking Tommy Lee Jones. He's like, I heard you're quitting. And so this is where we find out that he's going to be retiring soon. And then he's just like asking him why and everything. And then he's telling the story about the uncle, like basically getting murdered on his own porch. And then he was the sheriff and everything too of whatever town, and he got murdered on his own porch in 1909. And so he's coming in with a different perspective, saying it's like, yeah, like you can sit there and say that like this is like, oh, like stuff like this never used to happen, and he's right there saying like, yeah, it did. Like it's always gonna be like this, and it's just like it's only when you start to experience it. Like he doesn't outright say this, but this is what I got from it. It's like, oh, it's once you start to experience it, it's like, oh man, like what does the world come to? It's like, oh, it's always been like that. It's like you just didn't you didn't cross paths with this type of situation yet, and it's not till it happens to you that it becomes real to you. So then it cuts back to Carla Jean at a cemetery as her mom's casket's being lowered into the ground. So the cancer finally took over and she died. So she's there at the funeral and everything. She gets home from the funeral and walks into the house. And then when she gets into her bedroom, there's Anton Chigurh sitting in the corner. And she's like, she just says like, I knew this wasn't over, And then just kind of then sits on the bed and starts talking to him and everything. And she's like, and then she says same thing that Woody Harrelson said, like, you don't have to do this. And then like, oh no, before that, she's like, why are you here? Like, I don't know I don't have the money. Like, I'm literally in all this debt. Like, I got to pay for my mom's funeral, that just happened. Like, my mom just died. Like, I'm still behind on all these bills. Now I got to pay for this funeral, all that stuff, like, I don't have the money. Like, so why do you need to come bother me about it, basically? And then, and he says, like, I gave my word. And she's like, what? That doesn't make sense. Like, he's like, I gave my word to your husband. Like, that I would, she's like, what? That you'd kill me? Like, that doesn't make sense. And he's like, he had the opportunity to save you, and he didn't. So I told him I would kill you, and here I am. And then she knows enough, like, about her husband to be like, no, like, that's not him. Like, you misunderstood, like that. She could still find the good and find the subtext and everything. And then, but he's just so one way about stuff that he doesn't see it like that. And then this is where she says, like, you don't have to do this. And then he says, why do people always say that? Everyone says the same thing. They always say, you don't have to do this. And she's like, well, because you don't. And then he tries to do the coin toss thing. He like flips his coin and says, call it. And like, basically like, no, like, I'm not gonna, she just refuses, like, no, I'm not gonna call it. And then he's like, you have to. Like, you have to. She's like, no, because it's not up to the coin. It's up to you. Whether, if you want to hide behind the coin, like, so be it. But, like, in the end, it's you doing it. It's you deciding, Because even he, like, and she's right, because it's his choice to give her the coin toss option. It's his choice if he just leaves and leaves her alone. It's his choice if he doesn't even give her an option, just kills her right there, And then, but then it cuts away and we don't see what happens. And we just see him exiting the house. He comes out onto the porch and he checks his shoes. And that's what makes me think that he did kill her, because he's checking his shoes for blood. Probably he doesn't want to create tracks in the street or anything like that. Gets into his car and he's driving through the neighborhood, and he's going through an intersection, and then he gets T-boned by a person running a red light, just random person. And then you see him get out of the car. He's like all like bloodied up and everything, because this is like pre seatbelts pretty much. And then so he's all messed up. He sits on the curb. These two kids pull up on bikes, and he's like, and then they notice like, sir, are you all right? And it's like, the other kid's like, you got a bone sticking out of your arm. And then we see like his compound fracture, bone sticking out and everything. And then and he's like, hey, like, it asks the one kid, it's like how much for your shirt? And he's like, oh, it's like, Jesus, mister, I'll just give you the shirt. And takes his button up off and hands it to him. And he's like, oh, can you tie it, please? And so he ties the sleeves together. So basically making a sling. And he puts it on over his head, puts his broken arm in there, and then goes to give him $100. He's like, no, like, sir, like, I don't need the money. And he's like, no, just take it, and you didn't see me. And he's like, all right, and then they take the money, and then he just walks off into the horizon, basically, as like the ambulance and police are showing up, and he gets away. Like that's the last you see of him. And then it cuts to Tommy Lee Jones. He's sitting at the the dinner table or breakfast table, whatever, with his wife, and she's getting ready for her day, and then we get the gist that like this is either his first day or first week of retirement, and he's just like kind of figuring out what to do. And he's like, oh, I might go for a ride. And he's like, do you want to go with me, to his wife? And she's like, no, like, I'm not retired. Like, I still gotta work. And he's like, well, I had 2 weird dreams last night. And she's like, were they interesting? And he's like, oh, it's always more interesting to the person it happens to. She's like, well, tell me anyway, like, and I'll pretend to be interested or something like that, or try to be interested. And so he starts to say, it's like the first, like, they're both about my dad. And it's weird because I'm older now than he ever was by 20 years, So then this is where we get that the dad died youngish, And he's saying, I don't remember the first one too much, but the second one was we were out on horseback, riding in the night, you know what I mean? And you could going through the mountains, and you could see the snow on the ground and everything. And he says that his dad passes him on horseback, but he's like draped in a blanket and like kind of hunched over a little bit, or just like looking down. And he's like carrying like a horn with fire in it, which must be like a thing that they used to do or whatever. And then he just like passes them and like goes off ahead. And he's just saying like I don't know where he was going or what he was doing, but I just got the sense that wherever he was going, like he'd be waiting there for me whenever I got there. And then I woke up. And then that's where the movie ends. Like just right there. It's just him telling this like story about his dad. Just not even a story about his dad, just a story about a dream about his dad. And then it just like, he just says the story, and then he wakes up, and then that's the credits right there. And I think like the point of that story is like now that he's retired, and now that he's seen all this like crazy stuff that he can't wrap his head around, and it's just him kind of trying to make sense and come to terms with all of this, like just life in general, like life, death, everything. And then just kind of like knowing like, hey, like I'm retired, I'm towards the end, and I know my dad's going to be there waiting for me wherever it is, like I'm going, and but yeah, that's it. Like it's it caught me off guard the first time I watched it. I was like, whoa, like that's it? Like kind of almost disappointed, but like as disappointed as I felt with the very ending, like I still was like in love with this movie from the get-go. Like just an amazing movie. Like I think probably my favorite Coen Brothers, and it's not like I've seen all of their movies, but the only one that would give a run for its money, is Fargo, I think. But I think I like this one more. But I do love Fargo. I know everyone's like, oh, Big Lebowski, and and they can cry into their circle jerk about me not picking that one. But like Big Lebowski's good, but it's one of those things that got ruined by its fans before I got to see it, And there's so many great pieces of art, whether it's movies, TV shows, band, like a whole band, a song, everything, video games, just concepts in life that just get ruined by its fans. And I think The Big Lebowski is one of them. Star Wars is like the main one now in society. Like Star Wars fans just ruin Star Wars. I still love Star Wars. But yeah, like that's the movie. That's it. Like another one that I'll just keep thinking about, and like I love finding new things and discovering new things about it. But yeah, Best Picture winner for the 2008 Oscars. Got to see this one in the theater, and this was a good year for movies because this was up against There Will Be Blood, which is another one of my all-time favorites. And it's like the fact that those two movies were up against each other, and I feel like there's another one in that race, but I don't want to look it up right now. But like, yeah, just those two powerhouse movies just up against each other, crazy. And then of course Javier Bardem won Academy Award for this, Best Supporting Actor. Great movie. All right. Well, I hope everyone got a chance to watch it before they listened, or that you've seen it before. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope I didn't ramble too much or go off on too many tangents. And if I did, I hope you at least enjoyed those tangents. Just thank you to everybody who's sticking with the show. Thank you to any new listeners. I hope you go back and listen to the old episodes. Anyone that got hooked in by like searching No Country for Old Men, like welcome. I hope you continue to listen. Please subscribe, like, rate, review, all of those things. Go to the Instagram. That's the social media that I'm the most active on. That's at movies they're pretty good with no punctuation in it. Just follow there. A couple days before the episodes drop, I like to post what I'm gonna put, and then what I'm gonna do for the next episode, and I also put in there where you can stream it or rent it and all that. Oh, where you can rent it is always the same place, but I try to pick things that are streaming at the moment, at least the week that I release it. But in the future, I don't know, who knows. But yes, thank you. I love doing this for you guys. Love doing this for myself. I enjoy this a lot. I hope everyone keeps listening, and stay tuned for next week, and have a great week for yourself. Thanks. Bye.